ladies and gentlemen. Now we would like to join with a participant who will be talking to you from all the way back in the UK. The keynote speech for the day delivered by Professor Andrew Baum. Before we move on to his speech, I would like to speak a few words about him. Professor Andrew Baum has a combined academic and business life for the last 25 years, developing an expertise in property finance, property development, property funds, and international real estate investment. He holds BSc, MPhil, and PhD degrees from the University of Reading in the UK. He is also a Fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and a qualified member of Institute of Chartered Financial Analysts UK. He is the author or co-author of several textbooks with combined sales of over 60,000. He has been rewarded with many awards and prizes as well. He holds and has held numerous executive and non-executive positions in a number of leading institutions and organizations. He founded and operated several successful property research and investment companies, RES in 1990 and OPC in 2001, for instance. Professor Baum released a groundbreaking report detailing the dramatic changes facing the real estate industry, titled PropTech 3.0, The Future of Real Estate. It was the most downloaded Oxford Side report in 2017. Professor Andrew was also voted one of the top 3 most influential people in PropTech in the 2017 Lend Invest list. He was appointed Emeritus Professor at Reading in 2013. He was Honorary Professor of Real Estate Investment at the University of Cambridge from 2009 to 2014 and a Fellow of St. John's College, Cambridge from 2011 to 2014. He is a visiting professor at the Kenan-Fletcher Business School, University of North Carolina, USA, and was appointed visiting professor of management practice at the University of Oxford in 2013. Professor Baum's research focus is on cross-border real estate investment, innovation, emerging markets, property funds, and PropTech. We are indeed honored to have such a profound personality in the field joining with us today. And before we move on to his speech, here's a small introductory video clip on Professor Andrew Baum. So I would like to hand over the session to you, Professor Baum.
Okay. Let me try and share my screen. I hope that works. And I hope that now you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to thank you for the invitation to be your keynote today. And I'd like to send my best wishes to the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, to the University of Science Malaysia and to Kyushu University. And congratulations to the organizers of the 4th International Conference on Real Estate Management and Valuation. It's a great effort to make this happen in difficult circumstances. And I only wish that we were all together in Colombo and enjoying the wonderful Sri Lankan hospitality. So hopefully we can do that at another time. What I'm going to talk about today is the connection between all of the real estate impact issues like climate, health, well-being, and technology, which is bringing together the possibility of creating a better real estate world. Before the COVID crisis, there was a lot of conversation in the real estate market about the importance of impact. So we've heard a lot about social impact. We also hear a lot about ESG. 10 years ago, we heard a lot about sustainability. Impact is very important in real estate. If we define impact as material change made to key populations or ecosystems in alignment with social environmental mission objectives, which can be measured. The real estate world is extremely important. By some measures, real estate is 50% of the world's assets. Everybody needs somewhere to live, everybody needs somewhere to work, and so on. So material change in the real estate industry is inevitably going to have huge impact. And we need to discuss how we do create that impact more and more. And the question constantly arises, are we as an industry doing enough? And are we as educators doing enough to push the real estate industry into a place where it does conform to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN? Or do we really understand enough about carbon and what makes a really low carbon building? On this slide on the left-hand side, we have a picture of the biggest office building in London right now. It's just about complete. It's called 22 Bishopsgate. It's over 1 million square feet. And this was promoted as a low carbon building to me in a conference this year. And yet the amount of steel and concrete that's being put into this building has got a huge embedded carbon cost. And we don't yet know really how to measure the benefits of energy efficient new buildings against the embedded carbon cost of construction. So we're still at a very early stage in understanding how climate is affected by buildings and what a really low carbon building or built environment really means. So we continue to have to ask this question, are we doing enough? A young lady in Norway certainly thinks we're not doing enough, and she's had a huge impact on the world, and she's had a huge impact on the real estate world. So Greta Thunberg has changed the agenda, and I think she's increased the responsibility on us all to think about the impacts of climate change. We're seeing more flooding, we're seeing different temperatures, and we're forcing migration. So climate change will create migration. That will create the need for housing. It will create the need for sensitive real estate, and it will create political change as well, which are addressed towards those goals. And of course, even in developed countries like the UK, we have a housing crisis. So even before we see mass migration from Africa, for example, we don't have enough homes in the UK for the UK population, so that the UK is supposed to be building or needs to build 300,000 homes a year. We've been building between 100 and 150,000 homes a year. So we have a growing housing crisis even before we add the pressures that are going to come from migration. And of course, political change, such as we see in the US, building a wall between Mexico and the US, and in the UK, which has decided to leave the European Union, these are pressures brought about by potential migration because of people's fear about lack of space and lack of enough homes. The real estate industry then has to develop a pretty clear view about ESG. And there is plenty of evidence that real estate asset managers do think about ESG quite a lot. So in a UBS survey, 100% of participants said, yes, they did have a policy about energy. But a green world needs people to be really engaged about this topic, and thinking about it, having a policy about it is one thing, but doing something, making real differences is another thing. So we have to think about what are the challenges that we have in the environment, in social aspects, and in governance. So if you look at environmental challenges first, the statistics are quite strong. So the built environment sector consumes 40% of global energy. 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. This is expected to increase by 56% in the next 10 years. buildings are using 40% of raw materials globally, and the cost of producing those raw materials is often more carbon, more climate change as a result. And so we have these stark statistics about our carbon footprint as an industry, which is enormous, absolutely enormous, the most important industry in the world regarding carbon. The World Economic Forum knows that the real estate industry is very important. We're starting to see more recognition of real estate as an industry which is important to the world. It's been the case that in many global business schools, for example, real estate simply isn't part of the agenda. But one of the things that's happened in the last year has been an increase in the recognition of real estate as an important topic, above and beyond housing and into commercial real estate. So organizations like the BBC at last are starting to ask for academics' opinions about the future of commercial real estate, the use of the office, the death of retail space, and increasingly the impact of the built environment on climate change. So the impact of real estate is being increasingly recognized, and it's being pushed to the front of an agenda which hopefully universities will respond to. One of the problems we have is that we have an industry out there which believes that it is starting to deal with energy efficiency through building ratings like BREEAM, LEED, and so on. And yet the empirical evidence suggests that there is very little connection between these BREEAM ratings, so the standard ratings of high quality buildings, and their energy efficiency. So this slide, so far, it shows that there is something like a 12% rent increase for high quality well buildings in the West End of London. And there is evidence that building owners will receive about 0.5% more yield by buying a highly rated energy efficient building. However, the operating expenses will be higher for that building. So you will get more yield, but you'll be paying higher expenses. And the most worrying statistic is that on average, buildings are 4 times less efficient in operation than they're intended to be in design. So an architect can produce an energy efficient building, but because the occupants and the investors are not familiar with how to operate that building, the building is no longer efficient. So we produce BREEAM excellent buildings, but these buildings can be incredibly energy inefficient. And one of the reasons why is because we have a conflict of interest or agency effects between developers, investors, and occupiers of space. So often the developer is building a building speculatively. The investor is buying it without being involved in the design, and the occupiers of the building have not been consulted about the design of the building. And the result is that we end up with less efficiency than we should have. If we move on to the social side of ESG, the fundamental question that the COVID-19 crisis has created is should people work at home? We're in a world where the majority of people, of course, commute to an office building in a central business district. The COVID crisis has given people a lot of opportunity to see what it's like to work from home. And a lot of people are saying they prefer to work from home. Employers have often, I think, made big mistakes by saying that they're prepared to allow people to work from home when actually their businesses are going to be damaged as a result of it. But there's no question that employers have to think about the social well-being of their employees. Now, there's no evidence that working from home improves well-being. There is no evidence that working in an office reduces well-being. In fact, there's growing evidence that people need to be in an office building which is well managed, provides the right environment, provides the right facilities in order to increase the productivity and well-being of the employee. For the typical corporation, rental costs and energy costs are a small part of the total bill of running a company. The biggest part of that bill is staff costs. So 90% of the cost of running a business is staff. So the one thing you need to focus on is your staff's productivity, your staff's well-being. And the building needs to provide an envelope for creating that well-being. Now, we know that building factors like lighting, noise, temperature, ventilation, furniture, the amount of space per employee, all of these things have an impact on productivity. And there are studies of varying quality which measure the impact on productivity of high quality ventilation, noise reduction, good quality lighting, and so on. And we also know that there's a strong correlation between the profitability of a business and employee satisfaction. So if a business creates a good building, the good building produces more employee satisfaction, happiness, well-being, and productivity, and that leads to more profit for the organization. So healthy buildings are currently very, very popular. And the building I showed you a picture of, 22 Bishopsgate, has something like 15% of its space dedicated to things like yoga studios, gyms, healthy food markets, contemplation space, and so on. I mean, who am I to tell the Asian market how to produce wellness and contemplative space? I think you've been doing that for a lot longer than we have in the UK. And then finally, governance, the way in which real estate is managed is a large problem. And the key problem that we have is that we have an agency effect which limits the productivity and the efficiency of the space. So this graph is showing that the lease type will have an impact on energy efficiency. So if we have a long lease where the responsibility for managing the building, repairing the building, and so on is delegated to the tenant, then there is less connection between the development process and the operation of the building. So leases are very important in determining who is responsible and who gets the benefit of energy efficiency and productivity, for example. So we have this split incentive problem. So a split incentive problem is a problem where the developer might be responsible for producing energy efficient systems, but the tenant is the person who has to pay for those systems through energy costs and is not consulted in the design of the building. So that there are a whole set of different split incentives that we need to think about. And the only way to avoid these split incentives, if you think about the purist play model, would be a corporation designing, building, and operating its own office building. And we're seeing that more and more with the big technology companies. So people like Amazon, Google, Facebook are increasingly taking the responsibility for designing their own workspaces in order to control not only the well-being and productivity of their employees, but also the energy costs and the carbon footprint of the buildings. So I'm asking everybody to think about this issue. You know, the lease structure is a barrier to creating efficient space. And we need to think about how we get through this model in order to create efficient spaces. So just to think about ESG, I mean, if we ask the question, what is the real estate industry doing about ESG generally, the answer is not enough. And wherever we look, we think that we have the answer to some things when we clearly don't. And we have split incentives which prevent efficient solutions. And we have an industry which, frankly, spends too much time marketing itself and not enough time doing things which will improve the environment. So this is a natural sort of break point in my talk, and the break point is about technology. So something clearly is happening in the world through the fourth industrial revolution. This is the second wave of technology innovation that I've seen in the real estate market. The first wave was probably 1999, 2000, the dot-com boom, the telecoms boom. During that period, we created the World Wide Web, email, internet sites. We started to see houses being sold or advertised through platforms rather than through paper and estate agents' shops. So the second technology wave, we think, was kicked off in 2008. And in 2008, we had two things happening. The first thing was the global financial crisis, which created a lack of trust in traditional professionals, lack of trust in the banking system, fund management, investment advisors, lawyers, and so on. And in the same year, Apple launched the App Store. So the iPhone was launched in 2004. By 2008, we had the iPhone 4 and the App Store. And the App Store created this way of connecting product with individuals. And I like to talk about the world being full of rooms. So simply think about the world is just full of it's just billions of rooms. And it's full of billions of people. And those billions of people are trying to access billions of rooms, whether it be for hotel space, housing, office space, retail, shopping, whatever it is. You know, the world is just full of people trying to enter lots of rooms. And before the 2000s, we had very inefficient processes for connecting the people with the rooms. So the App Store was massively significant because it created the connection between the rooms and the people. So you now have the possibility of creating an app which billions of people can go onto to search for billions of rooms. And of course, that led to the launch of Airbnb. Airbnb is a unicorn, $1 billion real estate tech business, if you like. And this sort of combination between the App Store and a desire for change amongst younger people has created this wave of prop tech. So I'm sorry about this complicated picture that's in front of you at the moment, but it's trying to pick out the main things that are going on in the world of technology and real estate. At the bottom, you see data digitalization. Everything is coming from digitalization. So real estate data has to be digitalized in order to make it intelligent and usable. On the left-hand side, you see the word exogenous tech, which is the world of big technology as it affects real estate. So driverless cars, drone deliveries, for example. I had a call this morning, for example, with a student of mine who graduated several years ago. He's from the Maldives. He is now investing in drone technology in the Maldives because the Maldives is a group of islands that are spread out. Drone deliveries are perfect for delivering packages, for delivering healthcare, personal protection information, and so on. So drone deliveries, transportation technology, creating exogenous shocks into the real estate world. So the shape of cities will change. The way in which we build buildings and concentrate buildings will change. And that will create smarter cities. But right in the middle of prop tech, we've got three things going on. We have the shared economy. So Airbnb is about the shared economy. It's about using space more efficiently. It's about the occupation of space. We have construction technology driving smart buildings. As we've been discussing already in this conference, smart buildings are a huge part of the prop tech agenda. So construction architecture driving smart buildings, which is part of the prop tech world. And then finally, we have fintech driving financial technology and real estate fintech. So things like housing portals, iBuyers, using artificial intelligence to value houses and so on is part of the prop tech world. So we're going through a wave now that started 10 years ago or so of prop tech, and we have a database of something like 7,000 prop tech businesses. The amount of money going into these businesses is getting bigger and bigger every year. We're now going through a consolidations phase where we're seeing mergers and consolidation of these prop tech businesses, and we're trying to push and create a slightly different world. So how are these prop tech businesses going to contribute to an ESG agenda. And I think that's where we can go next. So the second half of this talk then is about the way in which technology can be a catalyst for sustainable change. The use of new technology is essential in order to create a range of sustainability key performance indicators, and that's where we're heading. So technological breakthrough is going to help us to push the ESG agenda. So if we look at the three components of ESG again, if we look at the environmental issues first, how will technology be used to drive the environmental agenda? Well, there's a whole set of sensor technology and building intelligence technologies, the Internet of Things, building information management systems, and so on, which will help us to create more efficient buildings. So we see companies like WeWork using sensors to measure the occupancy of a room and to measure the heating in a room, so that you can now do a simple thing like connecting the temperature in a room with the usability of that room. And if a room is empty, the temperature should be automatically switched down so that you don't need to spend so much energy on that room. So the use of sensors can create much more efficient use of buildings, and it can also forecast what needs to be done to a building to make it popular for occupiers. So centrally managed sensor systems are likely to be used to promote energy efficiency. As a sort of a side talk to this, by the way, if you can imagine health sensors for rooms, imagine how many sensors you would sell if you created a health sensor for a room right now. So that we can envisage a world in 5 to 10 years' time where not only will the buildings be energy efficient, but they'll also be measuring their own health and admitting only healthy people into those rooms. Well-being is going to be the big agenda from now on. So we talk about health. So the possibility to create a health sensor is something that will be worked on. It's being worked on now by engineering companies. The opportunity to create wearables which measure our own health and will allow us to enter a building or prevent us from entering a building. It's already being done. I mean, in my building, my business school in the University of Oxford will not allow me to enter the building if I have an heightened temperature. So we already are in this system where we're using sensors to prevent people from entering rooms if they're not healthy. We'll also then develop workable workplace wearables, which will collect biometric data to enable businesses to make adjustments to working conditions in order to improve the productivity and well-being of their staff. And we'll also see, I think, an increase in tenant experience apps. If you think about the difference between running an office building and running a hotel, the management of a hotel is collecting data all the time about their customers. So if we're talking about the retail market, individual customers, B2C, then the hotel operator is collecting B2C information about the type of rooms that individuals use, what they like to buy from the minibar, what meals they order, how long they stay, how far they travel, whether they need car parking. All of this information is collected by hotels. They also have a B2B platform so that they will know what the businesses who block conference space want. And they'll also have a platform business so that they will be interested in what Booking.com or TripAdvisor or any similar experience app will tell them. So they're relating to the market through B2C, B2B, and platforms. The owner of an office building typically doesn't think that way. They don't really think about B2C because they don't have a strong connection with the people sitting at the desks. You think about a pension fund owner of an office building has no relationship with the person sitting at the desk. There might be 3 layers between them: a property manager, a facilities manager, an asset manager, a joint venture partner, and so on. So what I think we can envisage in future is more use of these sorts of concepts when we're running office buildings. And flex office providers like WeWork have introduced this idea of developing a community of occupiers of space whose behavioral data will be of value, whose health will be valuable, and where some sort of tenant experience platform can be expected to grow to give feedback to the office owner and operator on how good his building is. And of course, the younger generation can be expected to be extremely aware of energy and efficiency. And they will be feeding back information through the system about wasted energy, things like heating being left on in empty rooms and so on. So this feedback loop is going to develop where the occupier, the customer, is going to start pushing the owner into a more energy efficient space. And then finally, governance. How will we improve the split incentive problem, or the conflict of interest, or the agency effect, which prevents buildings from being operated in the way they should be operated in the conception of the architect? And earlier in the talk, I spoke about the lease being a barrier to efficiency, this separation between the design of the building and the operation of the building, which is often by a completely different set of people from those for whom it was designed in the first place. And this is all about governance. So here we have my schematic that the world is full of millions of desks and it's full of millions of workers. Those millions of workers are trying to access those millions of desks. Now, one of the interesting questions I think that's come out of the COVID crisis is, number one, if you can't work in your office in the CBD, is working from home the best answer? Or should you be working in a more specific space, a third space, for example, like flex offices? And the connection between home working, working in a traditional office, and this concept of the third space, the flex office space, is starting to be explored. So what do we need in order to collect millions of workers with millions of desks? We need an app. So right now we see companies who are starting to build data sets of spaces, and those spaces could be churches, concert halls, theatres, municipal spaces like libraries, pubs, hotels, restaurants. So a company called Spacious in the US has been providing restaurant space to office workers for several years already. So how do we use apps to connect space with people? And this technology is being used and being employed more and more, so that eventually we'll see that there'll be shorter and shorter leases associated with flexible working. And we'll start to see this building up of B2C space in the office market, so that we'll then see direct feedback from the user of the space, who will be energy conscious, charge for energy as well, feeding back the information to the building owner. So imagine a world where we don't have leases, occupiers, office workers. We have self-employed people using an app to find space to go to work in, and to pay a combined rate for energy and the space, and doing that on a real pricing basis, so that if the space is empty, the price will come down. Once that starts to happen, you break through the conflict of interest, you break through the split incentive problem, and you then directly connect the consumer of space with the owner and probably developer of space. And we end up with a more energy efficient environment with better well-being and better productivity. So it looks as if the future of real estate ESG is going to be brighter than the history of it because of the use of technology. We're going to have accurate occupancy monitoring. So empty rooms will not be heated. We're going to have smart building technology, which will tell us more about how the building is being used, what sort of space is popular, what sort of space is productive. We'll have tenant feedback loops through wearables where the information about the human being is delivered to the center in combination with data about the building. So are people happy, healthy in spaces which are well lit, well ventilated, and so on? We're going to see a rapidly growing market for flexible workspace. Personally, I believe that people should not be working at home more than a small amount of time. I have to say, to be honest, I've been doing this for 6 months and I'm going nuts working at home. It would be much better. It's much better when I go to Oxford or when I go to London. And if I can't do that, then I want some third space. I want somewhere where I can go and meet people, to work in a healthy environment with good coffee, good broadband, and so on. So there's going to be a rapidly growing market for flexible workspace. We're going to see office brokerage and smart building platforms, which will find it much easier to lease space that is healthy. And we're going to see rent premiums for buildings that satisfy these new ESG measurements, so that we then start to internalize the economics of healthy buildings, whereas currently they seem to be externalized because of the split incentive between the developer, the owner, and the occupier. So when we get to the point where buildings that are better for people earn higher rents, and those higher rents are associated with more efficient energy as well, then we end up with a benign scenario in the built environment. I'm coming to the end of my talk, well within the hour I was allocated, so I hope that's not going to cause any difficulties. I'd like to point you towards our research publications at the University of Oxford Future of Real Estate Initiative. So if you Google University of Oxford Future of Real Estate, you'll see a set of publications about these topics. This year we produced PropTech 2020, The Future of Real Estate, and several other large monographs about these issues. There's our link. Please simply look at Oxford Future of Real Estate. Thank you again for inviting me to be the keynote speaker at the 4th conference. And I wish you all an excellent week with some great insights. And I'd be delighted if anybody has any questions to answer them. If not, I'd like to hand you back to the organisers and to Sandini. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Professor Baum, for joining with us today from all the way back in UK, although we did experience a slight difficulty in establishing connection with you. It was a very insightful and enlightening session, and we are really glad that you had time to join with us, and we are indeed privileged and honored that you could join with us. But before you go, we would also like you to join in with a small documentary video about our university, as well as a small video clip that we have prepared. Once again, thank you very much for taking time, Professor Baum. It was indeed a privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you.